The next morning was quiet. Most of the ad crew packed up, preparing to return to the city. Bethany declined a ride home, explaining that she wanted to explore the area by road and take the scenic route. When offered a ride in the Mercedes, she politely declined. "I'm hoping to take a more casual route back," she said. She went to the local garage to check on rental vehicles. "I'm afraid our only car is already out," the agent explained. "Still waiting for it to be returned from Perth." Bethany smiled. "Oh, right. I flew back urgently last time for a reshoot. Long story." She leaned closer. "Any chance there's a 4-wheel drive available anywhere nearby?" The agent typed a few commands into the computer. "Well, there's a Land Rover available in Leonora. I can arrange to have it brought here this afternoon if that works." "That would be perfect," Bethany replied. As she left, she noticed a few more people than usual gathered outside, locals watching her movements with quiet interest. What she didn't realize was that someone from earlier had already visited the garage after she'd walked away. Later that afternoon, Bethany picked up the 4-wheel drive from the garage and returned to the unit. She packed a few practical changes of clothes and left the rest, figuring she wouldn't need much. Her intent was to eventually resume life under a new identity, not necessarily Gary, depending on whether the authorities were still actively searching. Originally, she hadn't planned on taking much of Bethany's wardrobe, but Ada had gently pointed out that leaving everything behind would look suspicious. The rest of Bethany's items were being sent to Perth, handled by her agent. After saying goodbye to the team, Bethany drove back into town and picked up supplies, water, food, and survey stakes. Her next destination was the same remote spot where Gary had once left his vehicle, a rocky area near a natural water source known as a Nama Hole. These ancient formations, often maintained by local indigenous communities, were small rock pools that collected rainwater, some plunging more than 20 meters deep. The one Gary had found was narrow, carefully covered with a stone slab to protect it from contamination. By early evening, Bethany arrived and set up camp. She didn't bring a tent, figuring it would draw attention if someone stumbled across a new one that hadn't belonged to Gary. Instead, she opted to sleep in the back of the Land Rover. Thanks to her smaller frame now, it was surprisingly comfortable. Only a small fire pit remained from Gary's old setup. She heated a tin of baked beans and drank some milk before slipping into a lightweight nightshirt for sleep. That night, trouble arrived quietly. Bethany awoke groggily, disoriented, with a sharp headache forming. She quickly realized her hands were bound, and her mouth had been gagged. It was nearly dawn, and the surroundings were unfamiliar. She had been moved. A calm voice whispered in her mind. "You are approximately 15.34 kilometers south of your previous location," Ada informed her, interpreting Bethany's muffled attempts to ask, "Where am I?" Bethany's heart pounded. "What happened?" "5 individuals approached after you lost consciousness and transported you here by vehicle. One of them placed a call to a man named Sam Bagalow shortly afterward," Ada replied. Bethany's mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Ada intervened? Why hadn't she been warned? But those thoughts would have to wait. A figure stepped forward and removed her gag. She spat on the ground, clearing her mouth. Before she could speak, a voice interrupted from behind. Well, Miss Chambers. We finally meet face to face." She turned. A man in a sweat-stained button-down shirt stood nearby. He was shorter than average, appearing out of place in the desert heat. Behind him, a white utility van idled quietly. Bethany narrowed her eyes. "What's going on?" He gave a shallow bow. "Let's not waste time. We know you're connected to Gary Carstairs." Quite the clever ruse, the staged disappearance, the gold prospect, the change in appearance. It's all very creative. Bethany stayed silent, watching as 2 men moved forward. But the man raised a hand. "No need for that. I simply want to talk." "You're not getting the claim," she said coolly. He chuckled. "So there is a claim. Interesting." You could have just sold it, no need for secrets. Bethany's silence confirmed nothing, but his grin widened. Well, if words and money won't sway you, perhaps this will. He motioned to the van. 2 more men stepped out, helping down a woman whose hands were also tied. Her head was covered by a hood. Bethany's breath caught. The woman wore familiar clothes, something about her frame and stance tugged at Bethany's memory. The hood came off. Bethany froze. The resemblance was unmistakable. We stopped by her home, the man said quietly, watching her reaction. Imagine our surprise when we found someone who looked just like you. So we brought her. Just in case we needed leverage. Bethany's mind reeled. Amanda. They had her sister. Facing her across the clearing stood the original Bethany Chambers. For a moment, time froze. Both women stared, one in disbelief, the other in shock. The transformed Bethany knew she had to act fast. Internally, she called out to Ada. Ada, now would be a good time for help. Before she received a reply, she dashed toward her twins' captors. At the same time, the real Bethany, seemingly frozen for a moment, instinctively stamped her heel down on one of the men's feet and twisted away. Bethany? You can't be real. You're supposed to be gone, the original shouted in confusion. Run. The transformed Bethany yelled. There was no hesitation. The real Bethany bolted toward the nearby trees. Ada quickly warned, that area contains several old mine shafts. Dangerous terrain. Bethany tried to redirect her twin. Go left. Avoid the center, she shouted. But the other woman, frightened and confused, glanced back with a glare. Stay away from me. You're not my sister, she cried as she disappeared into the trees. Bethany had no time to unpack the strange accusation. Pursuit from the captors was slow. Their leader, the Italian man, stood back, observing, confident they couldn't get far. Then came the sound, a sharp scream that cut off suddenly. Bethany's blood went cold, but she kept running. Ada, she gasped mentally, now would be a very good time for that escape plan. I can hide you for approximately 30 minutes, Ada replied. But the location is parallel space, difficult on your senses. Keep your eyes closed during transition. Do I have other options? I could convert you into a local animal. A wallaby would allow you to evade capture easily. Hard pass, Bethany muttered. Option 1. Commencing transition, Ada confirmed. Bethany shut her eyes tightly. The sensation was overwhelming, weightless, ungrounded, like floating through swirling static. Curiosity tempted her, and she cracked one eye open. The moment she did, impossible shapes, fractured dimensions, and warping light flooded her vision. Her mind reeled. She clamped her eyes shut and focused on breathing. Think of something calming, Ada said softly. Bethany tried to imagine a peaceful beach, but the memory twisted. In her mind's eye, she saw herself, not Gary, lying in the sun, wearing a pale yellow bikini. She wasn't the observer now, she was the one being noticed. That realization brought a strange mix of discomfort and understanding. Meanwhile, back at the abandoned site, the Italian pounded the ground in frustration. Where is she? He barked at his men. First, you let one of them run off, possibly into an old shaft, and now you've lost the other. One of the hired men pointed at the ground. Her tracks end right here. Nothing beyond this point. The Italian stared in disbelief. Don't tell me she just disappeared. A few members of the tracking group, silent until now, stood apart, speaking in hushed voices. Their tone was cautious, reverent. What are they saying? The Italian snapped. They think she vanished. Like a spirit came the hesitant reply. They don't want to go further. Spirit, the man shouted, exasperated. She's no more a spirit than I am. But even he couldn't deny what the footprints revealed. They simply stopped. No trees. No rocks. No obvious escape route. Furious, the man stormed back toward the van to call for reinforcements. Bethany felt the oppressive quiet of the desert return as Ada brought them back to physical reality. Despite everything, it was a relief to be in familiar air again. Ada, are we clear? I detect no one nearby, Ada replied. But I recommend moving quickly. Bethany backtracked along the terrain, angling toward where the original Bethany had run. As she crept through the brush, voices drifted on the wind. The captors hadn't left, just retreated to the shade of the vehicle. Then she saw it. An open pit, covered in shadow. The edge was barely visible, no warning signs, no barriers. Bethany nearly stepped into it before freezing. She peered over the side. A sheer vertical drop extended at least 30 meters below. The walls were rough-cut stone, and at the bottom, only darkness. She didn't see her twin, but the silence was haunting. I detect life signs, Ada announced calmly. Bethany froze. She's still alive down there? Confirmed, Ada replied. Relief washed over Bethany, but it was short-lived. We have to help her, but those men are still close. We can't stay out in the open. You want to rescue her, even knowing it could risk everything? Ada asked, genuinely curious. Bethany didn't hesitate. Of course. What kind of person do you think I am? Ada paused. Noted. High moral reasoning. Rare for someone in your position. Bethany scanned the surrounding area. There wasn't much, just bare ground and an old mine entrance barely visible unless you were standing right over it. But something caught her eye, rusted lengths of steel cable and what looked like old framework scattered further away. She had an idea. Ada, can you contact the authorities? Tell them where we are and get them to help. We don't have much time. Already done. I made the call when you committed to saving her, Ada responded. Help is en route. ETA, 17 minutes. Bethany blinked. I didn't know they had a helicopter available. They don't, Ada replied. But the one Toby used hadn't departed yet due to maintenance. The authorities requisitioned it. Soon, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades echoed in the air. Bethany heard the sound of a vehicle speeding away, likely the Italian and his crew abandoning the area. The helicopter circled, then touched down nearby. Bethany ran forward, waving her arms. A uniformed officer called out, "We passed a vehicle a few clicks back." Was that yours? Bethany jogged to the edge of the rotor zone. Yes, that's mine. We'll need it. My sister's down that shaft. We need it to pull her up. What about the other vehicle heading toward Leonora? They're the ones who abducted her, Bethany said without hesitation. The officer's expression darkened. All right. I'll send one of my men to retrieve your vehicle and follow them. We'll get an ambulance sent here ASAP. Thanks. I'll be near the shaft, Bethany added, pointing toward the mine entrance. As the helicopter lifted off again, Bethany shielded her eyes from the dust. She sprinted back to the site. While waiting, she scanned the area for anything useful. Among the mining debris, she found a large steel frame, heavy, but possibly workable. It looked like part of an old winch system or cage. Bethany managed to drag it to the shaft's edge, using all the strength her modified body could summon. Ada quietly assisted with minor enhancements to her muscles as she worked. By the time she finished, she heard the engine of her 4x4 approaching. A young officer stepped out. Jim Collins. They sent me to assist. Bethany explained her plan quickly and clearly. Jim seemed overwhelmed but nodded. I'll help. But are you sure you should be the one going down? She's my sister, Bethany said gently. I'm lighter. I know roughly where she is. Time matters more than protocol right now. Jim hesitated, then relented. Okay, let's be quick. They secured the rusted steel cable to the frame and vehicle. Bethany inspected it closely. Don't worry, the air here is so dry that the rust is mostly surface level, she reassured him. I've seen tin cans here still intact after decades. She changed into more practical clothing and packed a small emergency kit, flashlight, rope, radio, and first aid gear. Using Jim's scanner, Ada helped patch a connection between them so they could stay in contact. Bethany climbed into the frame. Jim eased the vehicle forward slowly, lowering her into the shaft. The shaft was deep, at least 30 meters. Around the 20-meter mark, she saw markings along the wall and something else. Blood. She tried to keep calm. Slow down, she whispered. The smell worsened. Ada, detecting her distress, temporarily dulled her sense of smell to keep her focused. Bethany passed rotted timber and corroded rails. The light grew dim, and the shaft narrowed. She scanned every crevice for movement. Then, just below, she saw something reddish. Hold position, she called. As the beam of her flashlight settled on the object, her heart sank. A large kangaroo, likely fallen in long ago, had lodged itself across a side tunnel. Its presence had blocked the shaft. Bethany steadied her breath. No sign of her sister yet. We'll need another plan, she said quietly. She's in the side shaft, Ada reported. Bethany scanned the narrow passage lit by her flashlight. She had Jim pause the descent and carefully climbed into the sloped side tunnel. The air was tight and stale, and her movements were slow, deliberate. Just a few meters in, she spotted her. Huddled against a curve in the shaft lay the woman who, until moments ago, Bethany believed was her twin. She tried to radio Jim, but the signal failed in the depth of the earth. Checking the woman's pulse, Bethany exhaled in relief. It was steady. She noted a head wound, likely sustained during the fall. There was bruising but no active bleeding, a sign the injury was likely hours old. She must have hit something on the way down, Bethany thought, piecing together that she'd likely landed on the fallen kangaroo, which had blocked part of the shaft. That fall may have absorbed some of the impact, a painful, yet unintended rescue. Bethany returned to the main shaft, got the radio working again, and updated Jim. She's alive. I need to check her for injuries before we move her. Jim agreed, voice tense. Say the word when you're ready. Bethany crawled back and began assessing for broken bones. She bandaged the head wound with materials from her first aid kit and wiped dust from the woman's face. The bruising had swollen around her eyes, distorting the features enough to make the resemblance less immediately obvious. She may experience temporary memory disruption, Ada noted calmly. She'll be okay? Bethany asked. I detect no major trauma beyond superficial injury. Bethany stayed by her side, watching for signs of consciousness. Her mind wandered back to Amanda, her sister. The accident that had taken their parents and paralyzed Amanda had never left her. Gary had found her, just like this. Alone, broken, waiting for help. A soft groan brought her back. The woman stirred and whispered faintly, Bethany. Bethany leaned closer. You're okay. You took a fall, but you're safe now. Beth. No. It's Liz. I'm Elizabeth, she said slowly, blinking in confusion. Bethany froze. Is that you, Bethany? Elizabeth whispered. I didn't mean to take your place. I thought you were gone. Bethany felt a jolt of emotion. It's okay. We'll talk later. Let's just get out of here first. She helped Elizabeth stretch and verify that movement wasn't hindered. Bethany then guided her carefully to the vertical shaft. She strapped them both securely into the frame, using the backup rope to form a makeshift harness. She radioed Jim to begin lifting slowly. As they ascended, Bethany used her feet to brace against the shaft walls, keeping them steady. Near the top, she called a halt, signaling Jim to assist directly. Within seconds, Jim appeared and reached down to help Elizabeth out, then Bethany. The officer moved quickly, using what supplies were available to stabilize Elizabeth until the ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. Bethany and Elizabeth climbed in together. Jim remained with the vehicle, promising to cover the shaft before returning to town.